Next, we come to the discussion of Langer-Hensel histiocytosis or LCH. It's a small disease, it's a small topic. Not many questions are asked, but of course, questions have been asked in the past, and it is something which students who are preparing tend to neglect. So, we'll be focusing only on the key aspects. Langer-Hensel histiocytosis was previously known as histiocytosis X. So, histiocytosis X and LCH are basically the same thing. So, what exactly is this disease? It is a disease which is characterized by clonal proliferation of Langerhans cells. So, there is a clonal proliferation. A single clone gets proliferated. Of which cells? Langerhans cells. You know that Langerhans cells are a type of histiocytes. They are a type of antigen presenting cells present in the tissues. And this clonal proliferation of Langerhans cells is often associated with tissue infiltration by histiocytes. This spectrum of diseases is called as Langer-Hensel histiocytosis, and it shows a very wide spectrum ranging from a locally invasive mild disease to a disseminated life-threatening disease. What is the peak age during which this disease manifests? It occurs between the age of 0 to 15 years. So, it is a pediatric condition, and males are more frequently affected as compared to females. The sites of involvement in most cases are the bones. Bones are involved in almost 80% cases, followed by skin involvement, which occurs in 60% cases, followed by lymph node involvement, which occurs in 33% cases, and liver and spleen involvement, which occurs in 20% cases. So, these are the major sites where this tissue infiltration and clonal proliferation tend to manifest. Potential MCQ, it is mentioned in many standard books, including Robbins, that more than 50% cases, I'm writing with a different colored pen, it is a potential MCQ one-liner, more than 50% cases show point mutations in BRAF gene. So, BRAF gene mutations are seen, which this point mutation is known as BRAF V600E mutation. So, BRAF V600E mutation. It is a point mutation in BRAF gene which changes valine to glutamic acid at the 600th position. We call it as BRAF V600E mutation. So, that is the important one-liner thing that you need to remember. Now, moving over to what Nelson says. Nelson says that LCH mainly involves abnormalities in the MAP kinase pathway. So, it is considered to be a MAP kinase pathway defect according to Nelson. It is a signal pathway defect. And Nelson also says that studies have shown that LCH cell is not actually a Langerhans cell, but it is rather an immature cell of myeloid origin, possibly in an arrested state of development, which bears some of the markers for the Langerhans cells. So, it is an area of controversy, and so we will not go too much into it, only for the sake of simplicity. Now, coming to the clinical features, what are the clinical types or clinical classification of LCH? Clinically speaking, it can be divided into two parts. LCH can be divided into localized disease and it can be divided into disseminated disease. Localized disease can further be divided into unifocal and multifocal. Localized is also sometimes written as limited system disease. Limited system disease, although the term is found missing from other textbooks. So, localized unifocal form. The localized unifocal form was previously known as eosinophilic granuloma. The name eosinophilic granuloma is a misnomer. There is no eosinophilia here and there is no granuloma here. It is mainly localized lytic lesions occurring in the skull. So, unifocal or eosinophilic granuloma, what is it? This is characterized by isolated bone involvement in the form of lytic lesions. The lytic lesions mostly involve the skull. That is so only skull ke andar there will be lesions. This is the mildest form and many times requires only localized therapy. The second is the multifocal form. Multifocal form was previously known as Hand-Schüller-Christian disease. It was previously called as Hand-Schüller-Christian disease. Multifocal LCH is characterized by features like involvement of the skull bones, so skull and facial bone lesions. It is characterized by underlying CNS inside the skull also getting involved. So, some CNS involvement in the skull. Since it involves only head and neck, so it is called as a localized or limited system disease. In case of Hand-Schüller-Christian disease, there is a potential MCQ which is asked in the exam. The original Hand-Schüller-Christian disease had a triad which was described. Now, this triad is no longer limited to Hand-Schüller-Christian disease, but can be seen in other conditions as well. So, if somebody asks you what is the triad of LCH, the triad of LCH is following. It includes diabetes insipidus, it includes exophthalmos, and it involves scalp defects. They are also written as calvarial bone defects. So, scalp or calvarial bone defects. So, if you see, all of them are due to CNS as well as head and neck involvement. This triad of LCH was originally described in Hand-Schüller-Christian disease, but now we know it can occur in other forms as well. So, this triad of LCH has previously been asked in MCQs. Both the unifocal and multifocal forms, they are amenable to therapy. On the other hand, the disseminated form is malignant form and it can be life-threatening. The disseminated form was previously known as Lederer-Seaway disease. Lederer-Seaway disease. So, what are the features of disseminated LCH? There will be features of localized disease, plus there will be other features like systemic constitutional symptoms like fever and weight loss. There will be hepatobiliary involvement. Hepatobiliary involvement will be in the form of cirrhosis of liver and primary sclerosing cholangitis, or you can simply write sclerosing cholangitis. Sclerosing cholangitis. There may be involvement of bone marrow leading to bone marrow suppression. So, there may be anemia, thrombocytopenia and neutropenia, and sometimes there may be CNS involvement in the form of ataxia and gliosis, which is not usually seen in the unisystem disease. So, any of these features along with localized disease is called as Lederer-Seaway disease. In addition, any of these forms, any form in addition can have skin involvement in the form of difficult to treat seborrheic dermatitis. In young infants, this difficult to treat seborrheic dermatitis is also written as difficult to treat cradle cap. You know that cradle cap is the other name for seborrheic dermatitis in young children. Plus, there may be other features which can rarely be seen, including lymphadenopathy, hepatosplenomegaly, otitis media, pulmonary infiltrate, pneumothorax. All these can be a feature of Lederer-Seaway disease. And X-rays may sometimes show honeycomb appearance. So, X-rays in disseminated form may sometimes show honeycomb lungs, honeycomb appearance of the lungs. So, if I have to show you a picture, you may get a visual question on this like this. They will tell you, look at this child this is a 3-year-old child who had difficult to treat lesions on the scalp like this, and on doing X-ray there was isolated lytic lesions without any periosteal bone formation in the skull. What condition would you think of? Whenever you get a question like this, immediately think of Langerhans cell histiocytosis, because bone involvement in the form of lytic lesion is the commonest presentation, plus skin involvement is the second most common and can be coexisting feature in any type of LCH. Presence of both in a child, one of the very likely possibility is Langerhans cell histiocytosis. So you get a picture saying these two things, they are the hallmark findings. So going back to our discussion, how do you make the diagnosis? Investigation of choice in these patients is biopsy of the lesion. On biopsy, you do histopathology and immunohistochemistry. When you do histopathological examination, you will find the presence of extensive infiltration of the tissue with histiocytes and macrophages. When you do immunohistochemistry, IHC, on immunohistochemistry, you will find Langerhans cells which are positive for the following tumor markers. And this is the thing which is asked very frequently in entrance exam. AIIMS 2 times, PGI once, JIPMER once, NIMHANS once, and NEET PG once. It has already been asked in the last 10 years. So what are the tumor markers of LCH in Langerhans cell? They will be positive for CD1A. They will be positive for CD207. It is also called as Langerin. Langerin is considered to be more sensitive than CD1A. You will have S100 tumor markers, and you will have MHC class 2 antigens or HLA-DR antigen to be positive in Langerhans cells. And when you do electron microscopy of this biopsy sample, you will find the hallmark finding of Birbeck granules. Birbeck granules will be present on electron microscopy. They have a tennis racket shaped appearance with the handle showing a zipper-like appearance. Serrations will be present like this. Birbeck granules are seen on electron microscopy. So again, you may get a visual on this. The question will show you the following. The question will show you this image, electron microscopic photo of a child with fever, hepatosplenomegaly, rash and lytic lesions in the skull is shown below. The biopsy showed the following on electron microscopy. These are the Birbeck granules. Can you see this tennis racket shaped appearance? This is the tennis racket shaped appearance. Plus you have this handle which is having a serrated appearance as if a zipper is there. You know the zipper. That sweatshirts with the zipper or the sweaters with the zipper. So this zipper appearance in the handle and the upper part having a tennis racket shape, this is the typical Birbeck granule. Going back to our discussion, let's talk about the treatment. The treatment of Birbeck granules varies according to the severity of the disease. In case it is a localized disease or a single bony lesion, you don't need to give any systemic agent. You can simply do curettage. You can give local radiotherapy. And you can do intralesional steroid injection. Triamcinolone is the commonly used steroid. In case of multifocal and multisystemic disease, that is disseminated disease, you need to give chemotherapy. In chemotherapy, we use a combination of vinblastine with etoposide with 6-mercaptopurine with steroids. So multimodality therapy needs to be given. And in patients who have a refractory disease, they may require stem cell transplant, hematopoietic stem cell transplant, or simply eukaryotic stem cell transplant, and a trial of cladribine. NEET PG question. Cladribine is useful In which pediatric malignancy? The answer is LCH. This is your NEET PG question, asked 7 years back. And lastly, extra edge point, what is the concept of risk organs? There are 3 risk organs in LCH. What are the risk organs? The involvement of these organs is associated with more relapses and a poor response to therapy. So, 3 risk organs in LCH include liver, spleen and bone marrow. So, the 3 risk organs which carry a poor prognosis are liver, spleen and bone marrow. So, this finishes our discussion of Langerhensel histiocytosis, and finally we move towards retinoblastoma. The ophthalmology discussion of retinoblastoma has already been done, but this is a summarized form of pediatric aspects of retinoblastoma, what you need to know, just the summary part. Retinoblastoma is considered to be the most common primary intraocular tumor in children. Second thing, the usual age of diagnosis. The median age at diagnosis, according to Nelson, is 2 years. It is 2 years. It is found to be unilateral in 70% cases and bilateral in 30% cases. If you look at inheritance, around 60% are found to be sporadic and 40% are found to be familial. And remember that bilateral tumors, bilateral retinoblastoma is always familial. It is always familial. Retinoblastoma, there was a question asked some years back, what is the most common inherited childhood tumor? Retinoblastoma again will be the answer. So, in bracket you can write, it is the most common inherited childhood tumor. This is your NEET PG MCQ. Now, what are the genetics? You know that retinoblastoma is caused by mutations in a gene, what we call as RB1 gene. RB1 gene is a tumor suppressor gene which is present on chromosome 13q14, that is long arm of chromosome 13. RB1 gene, the protein formed from that, its normal function is to keep the G1S transition in check. When mutation occurs in RB1, it does not cause the disease. The mutations are usually autosomal dominant inherited, but RB2, RB1 gene, both mutations, both alleles have to be lost to produce retinoblastoma. Let me give you an example. Suppose I have RB1 gene and a mutation occurred in my RB1 gene. Okay. Since it is a single mutation, it will not be sufficient to cause retinoblastoma. Why? Because there are 2 alleles. There are 2 chromosomes, 2 copies of RB1 gene. Even if one is absent, if one is not working, the other is good enough to keep the G1S transition in check. Now, what will happen is, when I have kids, my kids will have RB1 gene already defective coming into play. Okay? Because it shows, the gene itself shows autosomal dominant inheritance if it gets inactivated. So, since it is autosomal dominant inactivated, my kids will have, they will be born with one defective RB1 gene. Now, during their birth, if there is a second hit happens to the other functioning normal gene, both the genes will be gone. Now, these children will develop retinoblastoma. This hypothesis is known as Knudson's 2-hit hypothesis. So, the genetics of retinoblastoma are important. So, what are the things that you need to know? Mutations occur in RB1 gene present on chromosome 13q14. The RB1 gene normal function is to keep the G1S transition in check. If single allele gets mutated, it does not cause it is not sufficient to cause retinoblastoma, but gets autosomal dominant transmitted. So it shows autosomal dominant transition. In the kids, if there is loss of the second allele, it will produce disease. The loss of the second allele. So the first allele loss will be inherited via germ cell lines as a predisposition, and loss of second allele will occur in the somatic retinal cells, and this will produce retinoblastoma. Very rarely both of them can happen in the same person, like initially first allele was lost, then second allele was lost. But this is very rare to happen. More common is one allele moving in the family, second hit happening, and then retinoblastoma getting produced. This is called as the Knudson's two-hit hypothesis. And this is operative in retinoblastoma. 3 MCQs have been asked in the past upon this topic, upon this thing. Now coming to second other malignancies associated with retinoblastoma. The other malignancies associated with retinoblastoma include osteosarcoma, also called as osteogenic sarcoma, soft tissue sarcomas, and malignant melanomas. Malignant melanomas. So there was a question asked in entrance exam. That a child developed a retinoblastoma, what is the next most common malignancy you will look out for in the child? The answer will be osteosarcoma. So osteosarcoma is the most common associated malignancy to occur with retinoblastoma. Then there is a term called as trilateral retinoblastoma. What is trilateral retinoblastoma? There are 2 retinoblastomas in both the eyes. So bilateral retinoblastoma will be there. This eye has one retinoblastoma, this eye has retinoblastoma, and one tumor occurs in the pineal gland in the brain. So this triangle is called as trilateral retinoblastoma. So bilateral retinoblastoma with pinealoblastoma is called as trilateral retinoblastoma. There is a theory in ancient Indian sciences. Our Yoga Pradiptika also talks about it, that there is a third eye which opens with wisdom. There is a third eye which opens when your chakras open in your Kundalini Yoga. That chakra opening, one of the site of that, putative site for that is the pineal gland. So in common language, pineal gland is also known as the third eye. Keeping this in mind, when tumors occur in pinealoblastoma, they are associated with both eyes having retinoblastoma, it is called as trilateral retinoblastoma. 2 tumors in the visible eyes, 1 tumor in the closed eye in the center. So this is mythology for you, but pinealoblastoma comprises trilateral retinoblastoma is your NEET PG question. So this is again important for your exams. So what are the clinical features? Clinical features, the most common presentation is in the form of leukocoria. It is also called as cat's eye, amaurotic cat's eye reflex. It is also called as white pupillary light reflex. This is the most common presentation. If I have to show you a picture, this is how amaurotic cat's eye reflex will look like. Look at this eye. Can you see in this child? Amaurotic cat's eye reflex. Other features which can happen, they include the second most common presentation is strabismus or squint. Strabismus or squint. Other features include glaucomas, poor visual tracking, proptosis, and fungating mass. Fungating mass may sometimes be protruding out from the eye. And what is the cell of origin? If you move towards pathology, cell of origin of retinoblastoma are the primitive cells of the neurosensory retina. Primitive cells of neurosensory retina. Pathologically speaking, there is an exocytic form which moves ahead and produces retinal detachment, and there is an endophytic form which is associated with vitreous seeding and cottage cheese appearance. But this is something which you have read in pathology, and so I will not go into the details. Microscopically, the hallmark are small round blue cells forming which type of rosette? I have told you previously in this segment itself, Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes. So there will be Flexner Wintersteiner rosettes which will be formed. And very rarely there is a term known as florets which may be seen. What are florets? Florets refer to rod and cone differentiated cells. So when rod and cone differentiation happens, we call them as the precursors of that are known as florets. For the sake of diagnosis, of course, it is an ophthalmology thing, so I'll not go into details. You have read that you need to do ophthalmoscopy, you need to do X-ray, you will do CT and MRI to look for spread. How does the spread happens? Metastasis occurs through hematogenous route, it occurs through the lymphatic route, and it occurs via optic nerve. Via optic nerve, where does it go? It goes to the brain. This is your JIPMER MCQ. So via optic nerve, it will spread to the brain. Just like in case of Wilms tumor, here also biopsy is contraindicated. What is the treatment? In case of unilateral localized disease, you will give chemotherapy followed by laser or cryotherapy. Chemotherapy will include multiple drugs like platinum compounds. You can use carboplatin, cisplatin, you can use etoposide, you can use vincristine, or a combination of these. So this therapy where you are giving chemotherapy followed by focal approach is called as chemoreduction and focal therapy approach. This term is not mentioned in ophthalmology books, ironically, but it is mentioned in the pediatric books, and because it is something which is seen in pediatricians also suspect sometimes, and question is framed from a pediatric textbook, you may find such term being mentioned. So chemoreduction and focal therapy approach is used for unilateral localized disease. And for chemotherapy, these days you can even use ophthalmic artery route or intravitreal route rather than the IV route, which is normally done. And you need to do enucleation of the eye. Enucleation of the eye is done along with the part of optic nerve if the tumor involves more than half of retina, if there is optic nerve involvement, and if there is glaucoma due to anterior chamber involvement. And outcome depends upon the stage at which it is diagnosed. Any patient with optic nerve involvement has a poor outcome. It is one of the prognostic markers we use for retinoblastoma. And a very important point which is coming to my mind. Earlier in this module, I had told you that well-differentiated tumor usually is less aggressive, has a good outcome. Poorly differentiated tumor is more aggressive, it has a bad outcome. Retinoblastoma is one tumor which does not follow this rule. You can write as a MCQ one-liner that retinoblastoma is the only pediatric malignancy where degree of differentiation is not related to prognosis or survival. With this, we are done with major solid tumors you see in pediatric age group, and we have done them in a organized, integrated manner. Let us take some visual examples of how questions can be asked on these solid tumors which we discussed. You may first get a photograph like this. As you can see in this picture, they will put up a collage and say, look at the following features as shown in the picture and tell the most common malignancy associated with this syndrome. So as you can see in this child, there is one limb larger, one limb smaller. So there is hemihypertrophy. This child has a protruding tongue showing macroglossia, and there are grooves present in the ear lobules. All the three together are a feature of Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome. And what is the most common malignancy associated with Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome? The answer will be Wilms tumor. So this is one example of how visuals can be asked based upon what you have read. Secondly, they will tell you, to 1-year-old child has abdominal mass and eyes showing the following. What is the likely diagnosis? This is raccoon eyes seen in a child, and if raccoon eyes are present with an abdominal mass, think of neuroblastoma as the likely answer. So the answer will be neuroblastoma in such cases. And the third example, a child had recent onset squint, white eye reflex, and biopsy of the lesion and histopathology of the surgically resected mass was showing the following. What is the likely diagnosis? Look at this picture. This is a picture of small blue round cells arranged in rosette pattern. Can you see the multiple rosettes? This is a rosette, this is a rosette, and this is a rosette. The key thing here is, in the center, there is no pink material. So it is no neuropil. So this is not humerite. There is no vessel present in the center. So this is not a perivascular rosette. But there are some on the edge. As you can see, small cytoplasmic elements are present. This. As you can see here in this. These cytoplasmic elements are present and the center is entirely free. These are Flexner-Winter-Steiner rosettes, and with ocular involvement, they will be suggestive of retinoblastoma in the patient. So these are the various ways visuals and clinical correlation will be asked.